Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the SkyBox sets Emotion and EXL from 94.95 and 95.96. Now, in the early stages of building ultra-premium brands, basketball was kind of overlooked in a way because the market wasn't all that big. It was getting a lot stronger, but it didn't have as much breadth at the time to really justify lots of different sets being created. So it was kind of overlooked in a way, and it was basically only Topps that really cared to take advantage of it. But that did change as you got into 94. That's kind of when everybody else got involved with it. And in the case of SkyBox, they created a set called Emotion. What they developed was a card that was basically kind of like a take on Flair. Flair was a thick cardstock. It was highly lacquered, strong colors, but with SkyBox, they didn't want to just do that. They wanted to make something very unique, something very SkyBox-like. And the big thing with Flair was they were trying to get rid of the border in order to really enunciate the card itself, the image on the card. And in SkyBox, they did something similar, but they wanted to enunciate the player, not just the whole image. So they basically faded away almost the entire background and covered it with a white to team color fade, which you can still see the background a little bit with all of its colors in it. But this was all about focusing on the player. Emotion was a set built on close-up shots of players, and they spent a lot of time choosing really, really good shots for all these players. And the way they did the background really focuses you right in. So they don't look like Flair cards because they don't feel like Flair cards, but they're built in kind of the same way. Now, also, unlike Flair, they did have horizontal and vertical orientations of these cards. They kind of went in either direction. But, you know, other than that, this is very much the SkyBox card that they were going to make. You never really thought they would make this, but that's part of the beauty of it. This was a really good creative idea that they came up with that was just truly the SkyBox brand. And on the card back, they did another kind of Flair-like thing where they have, basically here it's a solid color background with two shots of player, two cutout shots superimposed on top of each other, and in that way it is kind of like Flair. And with these cards, some of the backs look fantastic. Kevin Johnson here, this is a great looking card back. Other card backs don't look as good because they can get kind of busy. So when they really took the time with these cards, they looked phenomenal. But like I said, some of them just not so much. But the brand name Emotion was all about making a personal statement about each player. And so on the card front, over on the side, they have a holofoil, kind of a rainbow holofoil text of either a word or a phrase that personifies either the player or just the image of the player, either way. And so the idea is that each one of these cards is specifically themed for the particular player. And it's a great combination when you look at the two. And they did this all throughout the set. So as the set's kind of bouncing around, horizontal, vertical, throughout, every single player has his own little theme. Now, some of these words and terms do get repeated for different players, but for the most part, it looks like they're all individual, and that's really great. And some of them do show up just once, but it's not like they have 5 or 6 terms that they recycle. So that's part of the beauty of the set, is it really does have a lot of variety. Now, unfortunately, because of this, and primarily because of the lack of border, the way that the cards look, they don't really work well in card pages. When you get them all in there, they're going back and forth between horizontal, vertical. There's nothing that really ties you. You know, you do have the team colors that kind of tie the cards together, but the cards don't seem to read. But the whole point of this set is these cards were supposed to stand on their own. They're supposed to be the kinds of cards you put up on your mantle, you put on your desk. You just look at that one card of that one player. And in that way, this card set is really, really, really successful. For the mid-90s, I think it is easily one of the best card sets for just really showcasing one individual player. Now, it was 94.95, and so they did include a Michael Jordan card. This was the kind of thing they were doing pretty much with all the sets, but unlike the other sets where they just tacked him on at the end, here they actually fit him into the set. Now, granted, he is 100 out of 100 player cards, but still, he is in front of the subsets, so that means that he actually fits into the set like he was supposed to be there. And it's one of the better looking cards of him from this year. I happen to think that the Flair card looks a lot better, but this is still a really good looking card. Back not so much, but the front very much so. But they did make 2 subsets, and the first subset is rookies. Now understand, these are not the rookie cards. As you've already seen, Jason Kidd already had a card in the set, so these rookie cards are a subset of the rookies, kind of like a repeat. and I don't know why they put these cards in here. The card backs look kind of like an insert card, but the card fronts, they look like a thick hoops card. They really do look like they're out of the hoops set, and it was not a good hoop set. I mean, the main cards in hoops looked all right, but the subsets didn't look very good. And that's the problem with this card, is I don't know what they were doing. They made this gorgeous set, and then they put these cards in. Fortunately, they did have one other subset, which was Masters, and this does look like the kind of subset you would expect in the set. There are not a lot of these cards, but they look fantastic. Basically just a little white fade into a background, that's all you need to do. So with that, it was successful. Now, being 94-95, they weren't doing any parallels, and they only did 2 subsets. So this was that, it was the calm before the storm. This was the year before everybody kind of took off and lost their heads in the mid-90s. And so at least they took the time with the 2 subsets, the first one being N-tense. And you might notice that you got emotion, which is E, motion. Here it's N-tense. It's that's the theme they were going with. It's actually kind of a cool idea. So with N-tense, these cards they're a fascinating exploration of gold foil. It's a gold foil card with streaks out into a mottled gold holofoil, sparkly fiasco on the outside. It acts kind of like a border. It's really neat what's going on around this card. Now, the card itself isn't all that interesting, but it's a really bright, flashy, shiny object. And in that way, it's great. This is one of those cards that you'll see from 2 miles away. And it's a lot of fun to look at it. It's not too fun to spend time looking at it, but it's got its own little quality. And when you look on the back is basically like an arrow pointing you back to the front. It's amazing. I didn't know that you could do a card back that was so focused on saying, nope, you're not here for the card back. Look at the front. Just go to the card front. That's all that the card back's there for. They also did another subset, which was Excited, and in this case they went with like a rainbow holofoil with some diagonal striations of this pattern. I think these cards look a lot better. They don't grab your eye the way that Intense does, but these do, in my opinion, look a lot better. And these cards they're a lot more common. There are more cards of them, so they're easier to get, which to me that works just fine. And the card backs, again, are basically just rerouting you back to the card front. But they did do one other thing for 94-95, and that was a send away for a Grant Hill Sky Motion card. Now, Sky Motion is a little bit misleading because in football they actually did make a Sky Motion card, and it was different. So the Sky Motion cards were all lenticular cards, but the actual Sky Motion set was more like the Sportflix version where they have a solid back behind. In this case, it's not actually Sky Motion. The set that they ultimately would create that would use this technology was called Motion Vision. Again, it was a football brand. Upper Deck would do one later on called Diamond Vision. But the idea is that it is a lenticular card, but because it doesn't have a back, the whole thing, it has a lot of motion in it, which is really cool. But you can't really see it very well, and so if you're on eBay, oftentimes it will just come in as black, and the reason is because it needs to have light pass through. And so it's not until you actually have light passing through these cards that you can actually see what's going on inside the image. And so it's a little bit tricky, but the thing is that once you actually do see it, you find that there really is a lot of range of motion, and they're beautiful cards in that regard. They're fun, and they only made this one promo card. So it's called a Sky Motion card, although it really became Motion Vision. That's what ultimately was created. So if you know Sky Motion and Motion Vision, think Motion Vision. But it is this one promo of Sky Motion. It's a Grant Hill card, and it is a neat card to get your hands on. So for 94-95, this was about the right thing for them to do. This was the right card set for 94-95, but for 95-96, they were going to have to really rethink the model. And for an introduction into the world of ultra premium cards, this was a great choice that they went with. The design was perfect, and it was a popular set, so it really did hold its own, and it was ready for the next step. The problem was they had to take a next step. The very nature of the set, Emotion, it didn't really fit for a whole series. Now, years before, Proline had done something similar where they had made a set that was all very personal, and then after a couple of years, they just made another set. But you can do that at the basic level. But here, you were up at the high end, so that means you've earned your audience, but now you have to change what you did that really earned it. So they had to be very creative, but they also had to tie the two across. I mean, what we would see from Pacific was you didn't really have to do that, but at the time, you wanted to do that. You wanted to earn your audience and maintain it. So they played an interesting trick where for emotion, it's E-motion. So they kept the E and they just dropped the motion, and they replaced it with E/XL. And so anytime you see EXL or EX2000, the E stands for emotion. It starts with this 94 or 94-95 set. That's where it originated from. But EXL doesn't have anything to do with emotion. It really doesn't. It's its own concept. And when they thought about the concept, what were they going to do? They wanted to go with art, because SkyBox was really an artistic set. It was great at making very artistic concepts, and so they went just straight in for art. This is a card where it's a picture of the player with basically patches of color behind him like a portrait. And then there's a whole black frame that's literally a mat. It's matted, and it has a cutout of the picture inside. It's really cool, and they have an interesting key element in it. This looks, I think it looks a little bit better than the NBA Hoops card in terms of how the key itself looks, but outside of the key, it gets a little boring compared to 1990-91 NBA Hoops. But that's basically what they did. They basically created a mat of the player. And for the rookies, instead of having a key, they had a rectangular box with some chamfered corners, which is basically what they did. And the card backs are, they're mid-90s card backs, and they look good for mid-90s card backs. So while the card set doesn't have quite the power of the previous year, it has a lot more consistency. And so it's a great heir to the tradition of the previous year. These cards, though, were built for parallels. And for the parallels, they basically replaced the black mat with a dark blue mat. Doesn't look quite as good, but some parallels are meant to look better, others are just meant to be parallels, and that's what this was. So they could have done it the other way around, but fortunately, because the black mat is the main one, those are the cards we most end up with, and they all look great. So I really don't mind. And they had one subset, and it was called Untouchable. And it's a smaller picture, so there's a lot more frame, and the frame is split between the black and an image printed on the mat, which, kind of holds it back. It's there. But they did have 4 insert sets, and the first insert set is a cut above. And a cut above can be a little bit misleading because the theme of this card is that it is the blue mat of the parallel. So this is not a parallel. This is a subset with a blue mat. They don't have a black mat, just blue. And it's a very thin mat around the outside with a big picture of the player with kind of a color fade in the background. It's kind of neat in a way. And in another way, it's kind of like a lackluster version of what's in the set. It is more rare, so do keep that in mind. But the main thing is to understand that it's an insert set and it does not have a parallel. And on the card back, it's not the card front, but it kind of has that feel to it because it looks kind of similar. But with this card, you're able to see something that's very distinctive about these cards, which is that what it is 2-ply. So it has a matte side and it has a glossy side. And with cards like this, they have a matte frame around the outside and you see the glossy card through. As we're going to see, sometimes they flip it around. And the best way to see it is actually the next set, which is Natural Born Thriller. Now in this case, they swapped it around so the front card is the glossy card and then the matte card is on the back. And they actually cut a hole in the glossy card so that you can see the matte behind. And the matte is a black matte and it has a bunch of little gold foil dots in it, which it's a really cool pattern. It's almost like fabric in a way. But what's really impressive about this card is at this time, cutting cards was still kind of an exotic affair. It was still kind of difficult. And yet they were able to cut an intricate pattern into the cards so that it was around the player. So you have these voids around the player within. And with the contrast of the glossy outside and the matte on the inside, it made a great combination. And also of intrigue is when you flip the card over, the whole card back is matte, which, again, no surprise, but it's basically a black and white picture of the player with gold foil text on it. And it looks really impressive as a result, the way that it all works. So it's fun how they have glossy on one side, matte on the other side in both ways. It's not just a surface that's a matte. And then No Boundaries is the next insert set. And with this almost looks like a 96 SkyBox card. It's actually not. It's a foil background, but instead of just a color pattern, it's actually a picture that is a close-up shot of the player's face from the shot in front. And so it has kind of a neat quality to it that I think looks really, really kind of good. You don't really notice it right away. You kind of got to get in there to notice it, but it is a cool trick that they played. But what's really impressive about this set is that when you flip the card over, again, you have the matte back, but the text box has brackets around it, and the brackets are actually cut in so that you can see the glossy card back coming through. So this was a really neat trick that they played on this card back, and it makes it really interesting. And it's very understated too, so it's the kind of thing you might miss a couple of times and kind of discover later on, which makes it pretty fun. The last insert set that they made was Unstoppable, and this is a black and white background with a color patch right around the player's head to really bring you into the center of the card, and it makes a very elegant card. It's a pretty impressive card. It's not a showy card, but it is a very nice card if you want to spend the time to look at it. And on the card back, again, it's a solid matte. This is one where you don't have a cut through from one side to the other. It's all glossy on the front, all matte on the back. But on the back, it has a nice color fade on it. It's a really nice card back. So even though this card set is the most bland of them all, it's a very impressive set, and it's a very professional creation. So that's basically what they did for this entire set. Other than the subset, this set was really a home run, hit every single part of this set. It was very successful, and it was a great successor to Emotion and a great lead into what they would do next. But what they would do next is to shift over to EX2000. I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole nother subject to talk about, but this is the path that they took into EX2000. And really, there was nowhere to go with the first set. There was nowhere to go with this set. So EX2000 was the right next step for them to take, and then it created its own life. But other than that, that's basically all that there is to really talk about with these cards. So definitely keep your eyes open for when EX2000 comes out. That's going to be a ways down the road, but subscribe if you want to look out for the next videos. As far as this video goes, that's basically all there is for it. So hope you learned something, and thank you very much for watching.